All right, did we do it? Are we here? Do we make this work? If I go this way, does that... Yeah, I think we're going to have to just keep it going this way.
Cool.
Are we live?
Are we live?
Yeah.
Did we do it?
I think we did it. Did we do it?
We did it!
Okay, we just have to cuddle.
Yay!
Hi!
Hi.
We're so
Is this
close.
okay?
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah. Alright, hi, Speak About It followers. This is take 5 or 6.
Take many.
It's been a lot.
For episode 2, What Are We? The DTR conversation.
Not DDR, which is what I thought. I thought we were going to be dancing
Yeah.
around.
It's
That
okay. We get
turns out it
confused.
has nothing to do
Yeah.
with Speak About
He
It.
brought a lot of glow sticks to the office today. We could use them
Seemed
if you
like a
want
good idea.
later. It gets dark at 4 p.m., so. Alright, so we are talking today about the good old DTR conversation. That what are we? Convo. But first, Arandi, do you want to define what DTR even means?
Sure. So DTR is the define the relationship conversation that so many of us, I would say probably most of us have had at some point or another. It's that moment where you have to sit down and say, what are we? Are we dating? Are we just hooking up? Like, do we use terms like boyfriend, girlfriend, partner? What does that mean to each of us? Are we able to sleep with other people? Are we emotionally intimate with other people but not physically? What does that look like?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it's something that, like, we all talk about with our friends, and we talk about how, like, scary it always is, how
Yeah.
awkward it always is. I feel like it's this thing that, like, people are, like, horrified of.
Yeah.
But, like, why is everyone so scared of it?
I think it's really hard to have that conversation because there's that... you're vulnerable, right? It's like any conversation where you talk about your wants and needs.
Right.
There is a chance that the person could say no, or that you're not on the same page, and of course you burst into flames when that happens. There is the fear of rejection, which is super real,
Yeah.
that you could want to have a relationship and the person that you're hanging out with, hooking up with, doesn't want something, right? So there's the fear of being shot down, and that's really scary.
Yeah.
And so I think people sort of dance around having this conversation because, like all things that are important, it's kind of hard and kind of scary.
Yeah.
And I jump in. I think there's one other thing. There's we talk about being chill these days. I feel
Oh
like
my God.
nowadays
Yeah.
we talk about being chill, and it's just like not chill to have that
Yeah.
conversation, right? It makes it seem like you're like putting pressure on, or that you're trying to steer it in a particular direction.
Like,
I think
you
that
care too much.
yeah, and I think that like that people feel like that's a legitimate reason to not have the conversation, but I think that that's really dangerous. That instead of
Like-
asking for what you want or advocating for what you want, you're just kind of stifling it down because you're afraid that it's looked at as being not chill enough.
Like trying to be so suave that you like don't care to have it.
Yeah.
That sounds like a horrible recipe for disaster.
Seems like a good idea. You're just sort of like blindly
That sounds
feeling
terrible.
around for cues
Yeah.
about like what is actually
I feel
going
like
on.
that is like walking into a restaurant and just not ordering and seeing what they send you.
Just like staring at the server.
yeah,
Like,
just being like,
Making eyes at the server.
bring me whatever.
what do you feel like bringing me today? Like, that sounds terrible. So I'm so chill, send me whatever.
So chill here's a
Oh,
block of
sounds
ice.
awful.
So then, like, when should you have the conversation? Like,
So-
when is it appropriate?
I don't know that there's a should, right? Like I
Yeah.
think that like my personal philosophy I think is that like if you've started to integrate each other into your lives on a regular basis, you know, if you're like talking on a regular basis, seeing each other on a regular basis, then you're probably gonna want to have a conversation just to ask, like, all right, cool, so like what do we expect from each other? I've seen a lot of really great relationships
Yeah.
kind of dissolve because one person just like was hooking up with other people and didn't realize that they shouldn't be yet. So I think, yeah, for me, it's when you started to integrate each other into your lives. But I think for anyone, like, it could be even earlier than that, honestly, you know? Because I think that if you're going into an intention, to a date, for example, and you know that you never want to date anyone, that you just want to hook up, you should probably tell the person that, right?
Yeah.
Like, you should probably make sure that they
Probably.
know that, like, just so you know, this is never going to go anywhere. And so I think it really depends on, like, what it is that you are looking for and want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I think maybe the second time I would hang out with someone, I
Yeah.
would be like, okay, this is not a one-time thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we're hanging out again. Like, let's be clear. Do you want a relationship? Are you, hooking up with other people? Do you, what kind of like sexual practices do you want to do? Like, is this going to be a like we're going to make out but nothing else kind of relationship? I think before that, I don't know.
Yeah. I guess it's
Are
like...
one night stands still a thing?
I think so.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
yeah, and I think, but like, hell yes. But I think it's like, even if it's a one night stand, if you're like practicing that sort of behavior of saying what you want, like even if it's a
Yeah.
one night stand, it's like, oh, I want this only to be a one night thing, or
Yeah.
like, oh, I like want to see you. Again, if you're like modeling that behavior of stating your intention early, even if it's not like defining your relationship forever, it's just defining the relationship that you have like that one day or that month or whatever. You're like making it so that the DTR conversation isn't the like milestone of
What
every
is that?
relationship.
Who's got the slogan that's like early and often? Is that for STI testing?
I think it is for STI testing.
I feel like this is sort of the same thing,
Yeah.
right? Like you want to have the conversation early before everybody gets super emotionally involved.
Yeah.
And then be able to adjust, right?
Right.
Like it might start off as we're just going to hook up and hang out and see other people. And then as it progresses, you end up having another DTR relationship where it's like, all right, we're going to be monogamous. Like, okay, we're DTRing the relationship by moving in together.
Yeah.
So I think you can have it a number of different ways and like in a number of different directions. It doesn't have to be one stagnant thing forever.
It's like a spectrum of conversation.
I
The
definitely
relationship's
think
always evolving. It's alive.
I definitely think doing it sooner rather than later, right? Especially when you think about our fears and the fear of failure and the fear of rejection and the fear of not being on the same page. If you have the conversation sooner rather than later, I feel like there's less opportunity for miscommunication and for missed expectations.
Yeah. I feel like this might be a good time to take out my fun diagrams that I made.
Yeah.
So we're talking about there's lots of opportunities to state what you want and lots of opportunities also to figure out what the other person wants. So I like think about this. I read this article that was like a DTR conversation is about what I want, what you want, and then also about what we want together.
There we go.
Don't move. So this is the what I want circle where you would list your boundaries and things that you want. This is the what you want, so the other person what they want. And what you're trying to negotiate is what you want in the middle. Now, obviously, if what you want is like nothing in the middle, you're going to be these two little circles that are floating separate of each other. And maybe that is a recipe for having a conversation about what you shouldn't be. But ideally, you can state...
I love feeling like Vanna White right now.
And it's like awkwardly on the side.
Vanna Diamond. So ideally, you would state the things that you do want separately, and there might be some overlap, and that's where like your relationship boundaries are negotiated. That's your we want. You can't see the caption, but that's what it says down there. And like maybe your circles will be totally overlapping, or maybe there'll be even less of an overlap, but like that negotiation of in the middle, I think is sort of like the DTR conversation, or at least the end point of it.
Yeah.
Because I think that like any successful relationship, like there's going to be a certain amount of compromise and a certain amount of negotiation. And I think that's exactly what this conversation is at its heart, is figuring out like where's the moment that we...
Guys, we're talking about wants and needs, boundaries, communication, and negotiating.
It sounds so familiar.
Have we had this conversation before?
I feel like we've DTR'd this conversation before. We're talking about consent.
It's true.
Yeah.
And like, what is the number one thing we say about consent?
It's to know... Oh, thanks.
Just ask. And what else? I feel like you had a second thought.
Well, I was going to say that it's about figuring out what you want and need in a situation, and then establishing your boundaries and communicating your boundaries with the other person, right? Because we never want our boundaries to be pushed. We want to establish boundaries because this is where I'm comfortable, as opposed to waiting for someone to cross that line. And for me, it feels like the same thing in defining a relationship. You want to be able to establish your boundaries and say, this is what I'm comfortable with. Because nobody wants to have their boundaries pushed. It's not fun. And when we're talking about consent, like, it's sexual assault.
Yeah.
I also do want to say that, like, I think it's important to make sure that everyone's ready to have that conversation. So I think that, like, that you need to be able to think ahead of time, like, what is that you want from a relationship and from this person. But I think that, like we're natural communicators, but not everyone is. And so the person you're talking to might not be ready to communicate in that moment. And it's okay to be like, hey, I'm having this conversation in my mind right now and I want to have it with you. Can we have it like tomorrow or like a week from now? So that way the person can process and like think for themselves. Yeah. Because this conversation can really like shock someone and make them be like, oh wow, I don't even know what I want yet. I haven't thought about it. And so like so being patient, right? Same thing with boundaries. Just understand that you might not be in the same place in terms of communicating those boundaries. Yeah.
But if you set up a safe place for them to do that, whether it's that night or some other time further down the line, then like, you could have a really productive conversation about it.
Yeah.
Are there other situations in which we like DTR something?
Like define the
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like in a work environment, like I feel like one of the first questions that in an interview or like in the first couple of days, like your boss will usually ask you like what is a work environment that's good for you? Do you like to like put headphones in and like tune people out? Like, are you a person who like needs me to communicate through email? Like, do you need like weekly check-ins? And like that in a way is like defining the relationship that you have with a supervisor, because they're like trying to figure out what way works for you two to communicate and exist and accomplish things together.
Yeah.
So like you're defining that professional relationship.
I automatically just thought of a potluck because food analogies all the time.
Every day.
But that you want to talk about it so that not everybody's bringing the same thing.
Right.
Like you are literally bringing different things to the table.
Right. So your like relationship Venn diagram isn't just all dessert.
Right. Which would not be a terrible party.
And if that's what you want, great.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I feel like I learned a lot about how to define the relationship today.
Yeah. I learned so much.
Now.
From this conversation. I also learned a lot from Googling some things online. So I'm going to share some of my findings of like some really terrible dating advice that you can find online and some really great stuff. We'll post that on our blog, speakaboutonline.com/blog, and we'll share that on social media. Any final things that you want to say?
Well, I was going to say, when in doubt, just ask. I've been wearing this shirt for a couple of our favorite events.
You've been wearing it for a couple days.
Yeah. I washed it. I washed it in between.
Not true.
It's a good thing you guys can't smell me. No, these are our friends over at HighPal.
HighPal207.com.
HighPal207.com. We'll put the link in the comments. They're donating 50% of the proceeds from these shirts to Speak About It. So they're a really awesome local group here who is making cool stuff and wants to help organizations like Speak About It. So if you want to rep the Just Ask shirt, find one over at HighPal207.
Woo!
Yeah.
All right.
So great. Thank you for tuning in for Hot
Thanks,
Goss.
folks.
Yeah.
We'll be back next month for
more Hot Goss.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Oh yeah, happy Thanksgiving.
Now the awkward part.
Okay.
Oh, so close to my face. All right. See ya.